The gift no one wanted. The hall was full of lights, laughter, and proud alien nobles. The grand feast of House Varneth was famous across the stars. Servants moved silently with silver trays, while music from crystal instruments filled the air. But behind all the luxury, something cold and sharp hung in the atmosphere: arrogance. At the center of it all stood Baron Krell Varneth, tall and proud, with glowing eyes and sharp blue armor. He laughed loudly as he raised his crystal glass. His guests, nobles from many worlds, laughed with him, but his words were sharp. "These humans," he mocked, "are good only for lifting crates and cleaning floors. Yet they walk like they matter. Let me show you how little they are." Everyone went silent when a human man walked forward. His name was Evan Cade, a simple mechanic who lived on the edge of the colony world. He had been invited by mistake, or maybe as a joke. He wore old clothes and looked out of place, but he had kind eyes, and he walked with quiet dignity. Baron Krell smirked. "Since humans think they're equals, I give this man a gift, one even I have no use for." Everyone turned their heads as two guards brought forward a girl. She was slim, with soft silver skin and glowing violet eyes. A glowing collar circled her neck. She looked young, barely grown. She didn't speak. She didn't even raise her head. "This is my mute daughter, Elira," the Baron said with a cruel smile. "She cannot speak. She has no voice, no future. Perhaps a human can make use of such a broken thing." Gasps spread through the room. Even some nobles looked uneasy. "She is not a pet," one whispered, but the Baron raised his hand. "She's useless to me. Let the human take her. Maybe she'll learn to clean engines." Everyone laughed. Evan didn't laugh. He looked at the girl. Her bare feet were shaking. Her eyes stared at the floor. No one had touched her, not even her father. "She's cold," Evan said quietly. "And scared." Baron Krell sneered. "Take her, human. Or are you too proud?" Evan stepped forward. "I'll take her, but not because of your joke. She's a person, and she deserves kindness." The room fell silent. Baron Krell's eyes narrowed. "Then take your prize, human. You'll soon learn. Some things are too broken to fix." Elira didn't move when Evan reached out a hand. She didn't flinch, she didn't look. But slowly, step by step, she walked behind him. No one clapped. No one laughed anymore. The party continued, but quieter now. Outside, cold wind rushed through the night sky. Evan wrapped his old coat around Elira's thin shoulders as they walked down the stone steps. She didn't speak. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes stared forward, empty. They reached his small workshop, a humble metal shack on the edge of the city. He led her inside. "You can sleep here," he said, showing her a soft pile of blankets in the corner. "I don't have much, but you'll be safe." She stood there, still as a statue. Evan sighed and poured her a cup of warm broth. He placed it near her. "No collar here, no orders. Just rest." She sat slowly, like she didn't believe him. She didn't touch the food. She wrapped the blanket around herself, tight like armor. Evan didn't press her. He sat across the room, tinkering, with broken machines. Hours passed, and then, just as he was dozing off in his chair, he heard something. A sound. Faint. Soft. Almost nothing. A sob. He turned and saw her, curled up, back to the wall. Her hands were over her face. She was crying. He didn't speak. He didn't move closer. He just whispered, "You're not alone anymore, Elira." She didn't answer, but her crying grew quieter. And in the cold silence of the night, a bond began. A broken girl, a kind man, and a story that would shake the stars had just begun. Elira had not said a single word in 3 days. She moved like a ghost through Evan's small workshop, silent, careful, and unsure. Every time he entered the room, she paused, eyes dropping to the floor. She avoided his gaze like it could burn. She didn't eat much, only when he stepped away. She didn't cry again either, but she also didn't smile. She didn't seem alive. Just breathing. Evan didn't push her. He worked quietly during the day, repairing old ship parts and cleaning engine filters. He spoke gently now and then, telling her stories about his childhood on Earth or funny moments at the docking bay. She never reacted, but he kept talking anyway, like planting seeds in dry soil, hoping something might grow. She sat by the window each evening, watching the pale moons rise. Wrapped in the blanket he gave her, she looked like a small lost child. Her violet eyes held a kind of sadness that even Evan couldn't describe. One morning, Evan found her sitting by his broken music box. It was a small round thing, dented from years of drops. It used to play soft melodies when opened. Now it only clicked and wheezed. But Alira held it gently in her hands like it was treasure. "You like that?" he asked softly. She didn't respond, but her fingers moved slowly over the edge of the lid. He crouched beside her. "I used to listen to it when I couldn't sleep," he said, "when things felt too heavy." She didn't look at him, but she didn't move away either. He smiled. "It's broken, like a lot of things here, but sometimes broken things still have worth." That night he left the music box on her blanket. The next morning it was still there, but beside it was something new. A piece of scrap metal, flattened out and scratched with sharp edges. A shape. A picture. It was a drawing. A cage. A small girl inside. A shadowy figure towering over her. And beside the cage, a man standing with a tool in his hand. Evan stared at it for a long time. He understood. She couldn't speak with words, but she had started to speak with images. The next day he gave her more scrap pieces and a dull stylus, and she began to draw. Not quickly, not many, but each image told a story. Pain, fear, loneliness, and then slowly, hope. Evan would respond, with short sentences. "I understand. You're safe now. Thank you for sharing." He watched her closely. She still flinched at loud sounds. She avoided eye contact when guests passed by outside, but sometimes she sat closer now, not touching but near. One cold night, a loud knock banged on the workshop door. A rich merchant, clearly drunk, stumbled in. "Hey, Cade, that the Baron's mute pet?" he said, laughing. Elira froze in her seat. Her hands tightened on her drawing stick. Evan stood between them. "She's not for sale," the man scoffed. "Come on. Just wanted a look. They say she's real pretty, even if she's useless." Evan's voice was firm. "Leave." The man's eyes narrowed. "Careful, human. You don't want enemies like me." Evan didn't blink. "And you don't want to see what I become if you scare her again." There was silence. Then the man left cursing. Evan turned. Elira was trembling, eyes wide but not crying. Just staring at him, like she was trying to understand something new. That night, as Evan repaired a circuit board, she walked quietly to him. She didn't speak, but she gently placed one of her new drawings on the table beside him. It was of her and him, sitting side by side, and a single line scratched below it. "Safe." Evan touched the drawing with gentle fingers. "Thank you," he whispered. She watched him. The wind howled outside. The room was warm. And for the first time, she stayed in the same room as him for hours, sitting silently, but not afraid, in the early hours of the morning. Evan dozed off at his desk. He didn't hear her stand, or the soft steps as she walked across the floor. But just before dawn, as moonlight slipped through the broken window, a soft voice, shaky and quiet, barely above a breath, whispered one word. Home. It was fragile. It was unsure. But it was a voice. Her voice. Evan didn't open his eyes right away. He just smiled because he knew. The girl who would not speak. had just begun. Evan didn't speak of that night to anyone, not even to Elira. When she whispered the word home, it felt like something sacred. He knew if he made a big deal of it, she might retreat again. So he acted like nothing had changed, though. His heart was quietly full. But something had changed. Elira no longer avoided him in the mornings. She walked beside him when he worked on broken engines, watching closely as if trying to learn. Sometimes she helped, handing him the right tools before he even asked. Her hands were delicate but precise. Her eyes missed nothing. She still didn't. Talk again? Not yet. But Evan didn't mind. She spoke through small acts now, cleaning a workbench before he got there, fixing the music box spring without being asked, or leaving new scrap drawings on his desk. The drawings were becoming softer now, less cages, more stars, less pain, more peace. One evening, Evan was outside fixing a hover cart when he heard the workshop door creak open behind him. Elira stepped out, barefoot, carrying something wrapped in cloth. He looked up. "Hey, you all right?" She nodded slowly and unwrapped the item. It was the music box. She handed it to him and waited. Evan smiled, sat down, and began to repair it. He tightened a loose coil, adjusted a broken gear, and rewound the spring. "Try it now," he said gently, handing it back. Elira opened the lid. For the first time in years, the box played a soft, shaky tune. Just a few notes. Just enough. She looked at Evan. Her lips moved slightly as if trying to form something, but nothing came. "It's okay," he said. "No rush. One day." She sat beside him silently, holding the music box to her chest. The wind blew softly, but she didn't shiver. Later that night after dinner, Evan heard something strange from her corner, a low hum. It was uneven, broken, but musical. She was humming the tune. It was the first time he'd heard sound from her during daylight. He didn't speak, didn't turn, just listened. Let it happen. He knew then. Her voice wasn't gone. It had just been buried. A few days later, something else changed. Elira began to write. At first, it was just single words scratched into pieces of flattened scrap. Words like sky, quiet, or fix. Then came simple phrases. I, like this, or you safe. Evan gave her an old data pad to make it easier. Her fingers moved slowly, unsure, but her face showed focus. She typed, "How music box work?" He smiled. "You really want to know?" She nodded. So he showed her. Gear by gear, spring by spring. He explained each piece, and she listened like it was the most important thing in the galaxy. One day, while he was working on a broken console, she typed, "Was I really gift?" Evan paused. He looked over at her, sitting small on the bench, her violet eyes looking down at the glowing pad. He sat beside her. "You were never a gift," he said slowly. "You were thrown away by someone who didn't see your worth, but that doesn't make you worthless." She looked up at him for a long time, then typed, "You don't want to sell me?" His voice was firm. "Never." She didn't smile, but something softened in her face. Like a breath she had held in her chest for too many years was finally released. That night, Evan couldn't sleep. He sat by the window looking at the stars, wondering if Elira's world had ever seen her as more than a problem, a disappointment. He didn't understand alien politics, but he understood cruelty. He had seen it on Earth, too. A soft noise made him turn. Elira stood nearby, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. He gave her a gentle nod. "Can't sleep either?" She didn't reply. Instead, she sat beside him, then reached out her hand, hesitantly, unsure. She touched his fingers. It wasn't much, but it was the first time she touched anyone willingly. They sat like that in silence for a while. Then she whispered, so quietly it was almost nothing. "You fixed the music box," Can you fix me too? Evan turned slowly. Her face was serious, fragile. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I don't think you need fixing, Alara. I think you just need someone to see the real you. She didn't cry, but her eyes were wet, and then she whispered again. I want to speak. More, I want to be like you. He smiled. You don't have to be like me. Just be you. That's more than enough. She nodded slowly, her hand still touching his. That night, she didn't return to her corner. She stayed beside him until the stars faded. And in the quiet whispers of the night, a girl once called Mute had begun to find her voice not just through words but through trust. The day the Baron found out his daughter had spoken, the air on the planet seemed to change. Far across the capital city in his towering estate carved from black stone, Baron Krell Varneth crushed a golden goblet in his hand. Purple wine spilled down his fingers as he read the message from one of his spies. Your daughter spoke in the human's care. She spoke. The Baron growled, voice sharp with disbelief. To him? The guards in the room didn't dare breathe. The Baron's pride had always been his greatest armor, and Elira, his mute daughter, had been his deepest shame. He had mocked her silence for years, never expecting anything to change. And now, because of a human she had used her voice, it was humiliation. Bring her back, he ordered coldly. Now. Evan knew trouble was coming before it arrived. That morning, as he fixed a fuel pump outside his workshop, he noticed the sky darken, not from clouds, but from a black hovercraft that descended slowly above his roof. It was sleek, sharp-edged, and carried the sigil of House Varneth. He turned fast, running inside. Elira was near the window, clutching the music box to her chest. She had already seen them. Elira, he said, trying to stay calm. Stay behind me. The hovercraft landed. 4 armored guards stepped out, silver capes fluttering behind them. Their leader, a tall alien with golden markings on his helmet, spoke loud and clear. By the command of Baron Krell Varneth, we are here to retrieve the daughter he so generously entrusted to you. She's not going anywhere, Evan said, firmly, standing in the doorway. She belongs to the Baron, the guard replied. This is not a request. She never belonged to anyone, Evan snapped. She's a person. Elira stepped forward behind him, silent but trembling. Another guard raised his weapon. Step aside. Evan clenched his fists. If you take her against her will, it won't be quiet. The guards moved in. Evan swung first. He hit one across the helmet and ducked a shock blade from the second. But there were too many. He was tackled, pinned to the floor. A guard held a glowing rod to his chest, shocking him until his arm stopped moving. No! Elira cried out. Her voice rang through the room, clear, sharp, terrified. All the guards froze. One turned his head. Did she just speak? Elira stood, shaking but tall. Let him go. Her hands were clenched. Her breathing was fast. The lead guard hesitated. We have orders. I'm not going, she said, louder now. Not with you. Not to him. Girl, your father demands. He is not my father, she screamed. Silence fell. She turned to Evan, who lay on the ground, bruised, but awake. She ran to him, kneeling, placing her hands on his shoulders. I'm not leaving you, she whispered. The guards looked at one another. She spoke, one muttered. That's impossible. The lead guard stepped back. He tapped his comm. Inform the Baron, the girl refuses, and she speaks now. A long pause followed, then he turned. We take them both. They were locked in separate rooms inside the Baron's palace. Evan's cell was made of cold metal, with no windows and only a flickering light above. He paced the floor, fists clenched. He had failed. He should have hidden her, fought harder, something. Across the estate, in a tall tower surrounded by guards, Elira sat alone on a wide bed. The room was luxurious with glowing plants and silk curtains, but it felt colder than any night she had spent on the floor of Evan's workshop. That night the Baron arrived. He wore shining armor and a dark cloak, his eyes always cold, now burned with fury and something worse, wounded pride. "You spoke," he said flatly. Illyra said nothing. He stepped closer. "I gave you to a human as a joke, a lesson, and now you speak?" Still, she didn't reply. "Answer me," he shouted. She looked at him, not with fear but with calm. "I spoke because someone listened," she said softly. He blinked, stunned. "You dare?" "You never tried to hear me," she continued, voice trembling but clear. He did. He waited. He was kind. The Baron raised his hand but paused. Illyra didn't flinch. He lowered it slowly. "You are a daughter of my blood," he growled. "You will remember that." She stood tall. "No. I will remember who saved me." Back in the cold cell, Evan sat on the floor, weak but alive. He had bruises and cuts, but he didn't care about the pain. Only one thought burned in his mind. "Is she okay?" Then the door creaked open. A figure stepped in, an old alien dressed in soft green robes. He was a representative of the Galactic Council. "Human," the elder said. "There will be a trial." Evan looked up. "A trial?" "The council has heard whispers about a girl who was treated as a possession, and a human who gave her dignity. The Baron's actions may no longer be hidden." Evan stood slowly. "And Illyra?" The elder gave a small smile. "She will speak for the first time before the stars." The great chambers of the Galactic Council had never been so full. Leaders from across the stars gathered in rows of tall silver seats, their long robes glowing softly beneath the shining light panels above. Alien nobles, scholars, judges, even a few humans, all sat in silence, their eyes fixed on the center platform. Today was no ordinary hearing. Today, the daughter of Baron Krell Varneth would speak. Illyra stood at the center, her silver skin glowing under the council lights. She wore a simple white robe, and her long pale hair fell gently over her shoulders. She looked small in front of the crowd, fragile, but her violet eyes no longer held fear. At the edge of the chamber, behind a row of guards, Evan stood with a bruised lip and bandaged arm. He had begged to be there, not for himself, but to show her she wasn't alone. The council speaker, a tall being with 6 eyes and a voice like smooth thunder, rose and looked down upon her. "Illyra Varneth," the speaker said. "You were born mute. For years you were known as the Baron's silent daughter, and yet today you asked to speak before this council. Is that correct?" Illyra nodded once. Her voice was soft, but steady. "Yes." A ripple of sound passed through the chamber. No one had expected her to speak so clearly. The speaker continued. "You may speak now, say what you wish to say." She looked around the room. So many faces, some cold, some curious, some doubtful. Then her eyes found Evan, and she began. "My name is Illyra," she said, voice trembling only slightly. "For most of my life I was silent, not because I couldn't speak, but because I was never heard." Whispers echoed in the crowd. My father, Baron Krell, treated my silence as a weakness. He told others I was broken. He gave up on me, and when I became a stain on his pride, he gave me away like I was nothing. Gasps, murmurs. Evan's fists clenched. He wanted to step forward, hold her hand, but he stayed still. "This was her moment," Illyra continued. "He gave me to a human, a stranger, a mechanic, as a joke." The speaker nodded. "And did this human harm you?" "No," she said quickly. "He never touched me with cruelty. He never raised his voice. He never asked for anything. He just gave me space, kindness, time." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't stop. "He spoke to me even when I couldn't answer. He waited. He gave me books, drawings, stories, warmth, and safety." She looked at the council directly now, and one night, for the first time in my life, I wanted to speak. The chamber was silent now. Even the coldest faces watched, her with wide eyes. She raised her voice a little. I spoke because I felt safe. Because someone saw me as a person, not as property, not as shame. The speaker asked, "And do you wish to return to House Varneth?" She shook her head. No. Do. You wish to live as a free citizen? I do. The speaker looked toward the elevated seat where Baron Krell sat, surrounded by nobles. Baron Varneth, do you deny these claims? The Baron stood slowly, face stiff. She was born broken. The human twisted her mind. This is all nonsense. But the council wasn't listening to him. All eyes were still on the girl who had once been mute. Now standing with a voice that shook the stars, one of the council members, a blue-skinned judge, spoke. We've reviewed the evidence, the guard's recordings, her drawings, the reports, and now, her words. Another alien stood. The child was silenced by fear, not by fate. That fear was created by her own blood. The speaker lifted a hand. This council declares Aelira Varneth free from all claim or control under House Varneth. She is her own being, with full rights. The chamber thundered with agreement. Aelira let out a breath she didn't know she had held. Then the speaker turned to Evan. Step forward. He did, slowly, unsure. The speaker asked, Human, why did you accept her? Evan glanced at Aelira, then spoke. Because no one should be treated like garbage, she needed help. And I saw someone who was scared, not broken. That's all. The council was silent again. And then, slowly, one member began to clap, then another, and another, until the entire chamber echoed with the sound of hands and claws and fins, all applauding a human and a girl who had once been mute. Later, in a quiet garden outside the council building, Aelira stood under a glowing tree. Evan sat nearby on a stone bench watching stars flicker overhead. She walked to him, sat beside him. He looked at her. You did it. She smiled. Her real smile. You gave me my voice, she said softly. Evan shook his head. No, Aelira, you had it all along. You just needed someone to hear it. She looked at the stars and whispered, Then stay. Keep listening. He nodded. Always. And in the quiet night, no more words were needed, because this time, her silence was full of peace, not fear. The stars above the galactic court glowed brighter than ever before. From planets near and far, voices filled the airwaves with one question. Who was this human, and how had he helped a broken alien girl? Speak? News had spread faster than anyone expected. Videos of Aelira's first speech had reached the outer colonies. People cried watching it. Others questioned the way noble houses treated their own. But the biggest storm was yet to come. The Galactic Council had called for a formal trial, not just to free Aelira, but to judge the Baron himself. Baron Krell. Varneth had ruled his world with iron pride, but now that pride had become his weakness. All eyes were on him, and he hated it. The trial was held in the Central Star Chamber, an ancient court floating above the orbit of a neutral planet. It was built from black stone wrapped in force fields and surrounded by silence. No weapons were allowed, only truth, only law. Aelira stood beside Evan. She wore a soft robe, white with silver bands. No more collar, no more chains. Evan wore his cleanest clothes, patched and simple, but he held himself like someone who had nothing to be ashamed of. As they stepped into the trial room, thousands of eyes watched from every direction, across the galaxy, across screens, across species. The room was round, rising like a stadium, filled with judges, historians, royal families, and civilians. The main judge, a being older than most stars, raised a long crystal staff. This trial is called to examine the actions of Baron Krell, Varneth, concerning the treatment of his daughter, Aelira, and the dishonor brought upon this council. The Baron stood across the chamber, arms folded, His face was like stone, but his eyes burned with quiet rage. The judge continued. The girl was declared mute for over a decade, yet in the care of a common human mechanic she found her voice. Why? Elira stepped forward. Her voice was calm, stronger than before. Because he listened, because he didn't treat me like an object, because he waited. The judge turned to the Baron. Baron Krell, how do you respond? The Baron's voice was low and bitter. I raised her in the, way I knew. I gave her food, shelter, clothes. Her silence was a curse, not my fault. Evan stepped forward now. She was never cursed, she was scared. You made her feel small every day. That's not raising a daughter. That's breaking a soul. The room murmured. The judge nodded. We have seen records, guards' reports, servants' whispers, images from her own hand, drawings full of pain. Tell us, Baron, why give her to a human? The Baron lifted his chin. She was a disgrace. I wanted her gone. Gasps. The judge said, nothing for a long moment. Then slowly he turned toward the viewing balcony where members of the public watched. A hologram appeared. It showed Elira in Evan's workshop, drawing. Then another, her whispering, home. Then, the voice she used during her testimony, all real, all raw. People in the chamber wiped their eyes. Then came another image, of the Baron handing Elira over like a toy, his guests laughing. The judge lowered his staff. A child is not property. A daughter is not a burden, and nobility does not mean cruelty. Baron Krell said nothing. The judge looked at Elira again. Do you wish justice? Elira glanced at Evan, then back at the council. I don't want revenge, she said quietly. I want freedom, and I want others like me to be seen. The judge nodded. And you, human, Evan Cade, what do you ask? Evan was silent for a moment. Then he said, nothing. I didn't help her for reward. I just saw someone who needed kindness. More murmurs in the chamber. The judge stood tall. Then let this be known. The council finds Baron Krell Varneth guilty of neglect, dishonor, and abuse of power. He is stripped of all noble titles. His holdings will be given to the public, and he is exiled from his former seat forever. Shouts erupted, some in shock, some in joy. Elira didn't move. She just stared at her father across the room. Baron Krell's face twisted with rage. You will regret this, girl. But she stepped forward and spoke clearly. No, you will regret never knowing me. The guards took him away. He didn't look back. Later, outside the chamber, Elira stood beside Evan in a quiet garden under artificial stars. A soft wind moved. Through the glowing trees, she looked at him. You stood by me. Evan smiled. You never needed saving. You just needed someone to believe in you. She took his hand softly. I want to stay with you. Not because I have nowhere else, but because you're home. Evan nodded. Then let's build something new, together. And above them, stars kept shining, witness to a trial not just of law, but of heart, where a silent girl found her voice, and a human reminded a galaxy what kindness could do. Weeks passed since the trial, but the echoes of Elira's voice still reached far corners of the galaxy. People remembered the girl who was once thought mute, who stood in front of nobles and spoke not with anger but with quiet truth. Some called her brave. Others called her a miracle. But to Evan Cade, she was simply Elira, the girl who had changed both of their lives forever. They returned to Evan's humble workshop, but it felt different now. Not because the walls were newer, they weren't. Not because there was more money, there wasn't. But because of the way Elira moved through the space. She no longer walked like a shadow. She no longer flinched when he entered the room. She no longer kept her eyes on the ground. She laughed sometimes now, softly, like she was still learning what laughter meant. She spoke not constantly, but when she had something to say, and her words always carried weight. She asked questions about humans, about Earth, about why Evan chose to live alone so far from his people. He didn't always have good answers, but he liked the way she listened. One evening, as he cooked, a simple meal, she stood at the window watching the stars again, the same spot where she once cried in silence. Now she turned and said, "When I was little, I used to look at the stars and wonder if they would ever see me." Evan looked up from the stove. "And now?" She smiled. "Now they know my name." Later that night, as they shared warm tea, Elira brought out the music box again. The one Evan had fixed. She wound it gently, and it played the same fragile tune. "I used to think this sound was just broken metal," she said. Evan raised a brow. "And now?" "It sounds like freedom," she whispered. Then she reached into her pocket and handed him something. A flat piece of metal with a new drawing scratched into it. It was the two of them, standing side by side under a tree. But this time, something new. A small home behind them. A shared space. A future. Evan looked at her, his voice quiet. "Is this what you want?" Elira nodded. "I want to stay. Not because I was given away. Not because I have no other place. I stay because I choose to." His heart swelled at her words. She wasn't just speaking now, she was claiming her voice, her life. Months passed. Together, they repaired more ships, shared stories, and slowly rebuilt the workshop into something more than just a workplace. They turned one of the side rooms into a small reading space. Elira added glowing stones to the walls. Evan planted flowers that bloomed under artificial sun. One morning, she came to Evan holding a small metal ring made from old ship parts. Her fingers shook, but her voice did not. "I read about something in your human culture," she said. "When two people choose each other, they wear rings. They belong to no one, but to each other." Evan's eyes softened. "I made this," she said, "for you." He looked at it, a simple, rough, beautiful thing. Then he took her hand. "Will you wear mine?" "I will." They exchanged rings in silence. No ceremony, no guests. Just two people who had found each other when no one else had cared. A year later, news spread of a new council program. The Elira Project. It aimed to protect young aliens with disabilities, silence, or special needs, offering them care, not cages. Education, not exile. They asked Elira to be its first ambassador. She stood once more before a crowd of many species and told her story again, not as a victim, but as someone who had healed. She ended her speech with a message that made every heart in the room pause. "I used to be called mute, broken, unworthy. But one human gave me something no title ever did. He listened. He didn't fix me. He let me become myself. And now, I speak. Not just with words, but with love." In the crowd, Evan watched with quiet pride. After the speech, she ran to him, smiling. "Was it okay?" she asked. He nodded. "It was perfect." Then he whispered, "You spoke for the galaxy, but when did you speak for me?" She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "I spoke for you," she said, "the day I called you home." And under the stars, in a world that once ignored her voice, she now stood tall, not because someone saved her, but because someone believed in her. And in the end, she didn't just find her voice. She found her place.